As beaten down as it might be nowadays, I do believe Mega Man remains the icon of gaming that it's always been ever since its humble beginnings on the NES. Gonna get this out of the way right now, I've never been much of a Mega Man guy. Not because I don't like it, I just never really got around to playing the games. It wasn't one of the series that I grew up with. In fact, it wouldn't be until my late teens when I finally sit down to play through Mega Man 2. But despite all that, to me the series still pretty much defines the idea of what a video game is, with its simple but addictive gameplay loop. Megaman X would mark the series' jump to 16-bit, bringing along a change of pace along with some improvements to the gameplay, including new mechanics such as dashing, which made platforming more interesting and just generally made for a more fast-paced game, and stages now contain several upgrades to seek out, encouraging more exploration. It's a solid game even today, still widely regarded as one of, if not the best Mega Man game, so it's no surprise that many look back on it for inspiration on their own projects. There have been quite a few Touhou fangames based on the style of Mega Man, both the classic series and X. Even one by Twilight Frontier, you know, the circle behind the Touhou fighting games. But we're gonna be looking at a far more recent one, Udongein X, made by Bar Holographic Otaku. Or Udongein Cross? Fine, Udongein Cross it is. You of course play as Reisen Udongein Inaba doing what she's best at, running and shooting. And sometimes jumping, I mean she's a rabbit. Instead of an arm cannon, she chooses to simply do finger guns, which is obviously the superior choice, and I'm so glad this was picked over giving her the funny looking gun from LOLcade. Listen, that would have been a great choice too, and would have been a good excuse to keep the weapon, but come on. You can't beat the finger guns. She gets attacked by rabbits on her way back to A&A, which turns out to be Tei's fault. It just wouldn't be a game based around this cast without Tei being an asshole, would it? But once the Reisen meets up with Seiran, who gives the news that some moon rabbits have crash landed on Gensokyo, and she's gonna solve the situation before Reimu finds out and claps them both. Which brings us to the classic stage select screen. That's one thing I like about these games. They're obviously still a very linear experience, but you get the chance to pick in which order you're gonna get through it. It also means that the difficulty doesn't really ramp up, or rather, it's all over the place, so pray that you don't pick one of the hardest stages to begin with and repeatedly get your ass kicked for about 10 minutes. It's a very diverse selection too. I mean, how often do you see all these characters in the same game? You get the obvious ones in Moko and Doremi, which, yeah sure, imperishable night and moon stuff. And then Seija, Yumemi and Saki. I mean, when making a game like this, might as well go wild with the characters you choose, especially when it adds a lot of variety to the scenery as you visit a whole bunch of different locales around Gensokyo. And Tenshi's here, which always gets bonus points from me. I'm not biased in any way, what would even make you think something like that? So usually in Mega Man games you wanna go for the weakness order, right? Assuming you know it. With every boss defeated you get a new fancy weapon which turns out to be another boss's weakness, so you can have an easier time dealing with the next one. Well, that's not a thing here, you see. I mean, how would that even work in this scenario? Reisen's no super fighting robot, I think. And stealing spell cards, well that's just not something that happens, I think. That wouldn't be a bad concept for a game actually. So instead of special weapons, after each boss you get a power item, which you can spend in the shop for different upgrades. And these are very basic upgrades for the most part. Don't expect anything game-changing. They're just here to make your life a bit easier and that's it. The shop also replaces having to find upgrades inside the stages, although that part's not entirely gone. Aside from the one you get from defeating the boss, every stage has a second hidden item somewhere in it. Usually in a hard to reach area with some platforming challenge. Some of them can be really well hidden but are pretty straightforward to get once you find them. And you don't need to worry about making it back because thankfully it's added to the count as soon as you pick it up. So no worries if you die right after. All this serves to streamline the experience, and while I'd be lying if I said I don't miss having different weapons to play around with, this change means the game can focus more on the challenge of pure platforming action. Alright, let's try Doremi's next. Something's not right. It's always interesting to see Touhou in the horizontal shooter style, even if it feels a bit weird, but it doesn't break the pace at all here and you fight Doremi the usual way at the end. After dealing with all 8 initial stages and rescuing the rabbits, Reisen offers to be the one to take them back to the moon, mentioning that she also has a score to settle with some peeps over there. This unlocks a set of 4 new stages, mirroring the Wily stages, as you make your way to the moon and fight Reimu, Junko, Tsagome, and finally arrive at the lunar capital which is in full alert. After getting through an army of moon rabbits, including the other Reisen who's very quickly dispatched, we get to the last bout which is of course against Yorihime, where a rabbit mentions being a hero of planet Earth. I don't know about that one, but sure, it fits the mood. Once she's not actually defeated, I guess it's implied to be an impossible scenario like in Silent Sinner in Blue, we get a bit of a heartwarming moment, much to Reisen's confusion, and the sister chooses to let her go back to Earth. So what happened to the rabbits we were escorting? Who knows, this ain't about them. You already have to accept that they were following Reisen all this time, so don't worry about it. Beating the main game unlocks an extra stage, taking place right after the ending as Reisen returns home. It's a small neat bonus. Apparently Intake has some issues with the lighting and it only works for a brief time after you beat an enemy, but the layout is fairly simple, so it's not really hard to follow. Except for this section where you have to wall jump through these moving platforms and... why? Why this? You respawn right before this part if you die thankfully, but god this was annoying. At the end of it you encounter Erin, who fights you under the pretense of punishment, but turns out she's just worried about Reisen, you know, eating shit against Yorihime. It's a bit of an underwhelming fight to be honest, not much more grand than any of the regular stages, though I guess it's cool to finally see the only character missing from the roster. Who's this Kaguya you speak of? Beating it unlocks survival, which is kinda your boss rush mode except with a streak attached to it, and also I forgot to mention the challenges. These are just achievements, but completing each one gets you a costume for Reisen. They're purely cosmetic, but hey, I'm a fan. It's nice to have them for future playthroughs. And this is a very easy game to pick up and replay, either if you're going for some of the challenges or really just for fun. I mean, it can be beaten in under 2 hours if you rush through it. Udongein X Cross is a very fast-paced game. With the use of the dash you can just blaze through the stages, for the most part anyways, and it's just so fun and rewarding to do so. Listen, Sonic had a point with the whole gotta go fast thing. It feels great to run through sections of the stage with little getting in your way, especially when the controls are as smooth and responsive as they are here. That said, this can be a somewhat difficult game at times. Bosses go through their attacks rather quickly and you only have this very small room to dodge, sometimes with no walls, making wall jumping not an option. Also remember that all you have is the pea shooter with a charge shot to face them. Most took me multiple tries until I finally beat them, sometimes with just a sliver of health left. But there are infinite lives here, and dying to a boss just puts you in the hallway right before, so having to try again and again wasn't as bad as it could have been. And there's no worry about losing all your lives and having to restart the stage from the beginning. I love the bosses here. It's definitely one of the highlights of the game for me. They are very fast battles that force you to always be on the move and react quickly to the attacks. Some even have really neat details, like Moko setting the forest on fire as she enters phase 2, or Toyohime throwing Yori a peach to heal her, which is annoying, but hey, you get the leftovers at least. My favorites though would have to be Reimu, with a nice reference to highly responsive to prayers and also she bats the fucking thing, and Sagome, whose gimmick is restricting your options by locking things like your dash or jump. Something that would usually be a frustrating mechanic, but it's handled really well here. It feels more like you gotta constantly rethink how you approach the fight. The dialogues with the bosses can be pretty fun too. Apparently everyone really wants to keep these rabbits for one reason or another, but some are completely unrelated. Like Seiya just thinks you've come to capture her and isn't even aware of the rabbit in question, or Doremi who's straight up willing to let you through and it's actually Reisen who provokes the fight as revenge for all the shit she was put through in Antinomy of Common Flowers. Hey, let her have her moment, this bunny can never catch a break. The stages though I barely had any problem with, aside from a couple annoying sections or we're going for one of the hidden items. Enemy placement is usually pretty forgiving and the gimmicks of each stage are never really a detriment, except Seiya's, which can get a little bit disorienting with all the flipping the level around, and there are some leaps of faith to make, but even still, at no point did it really get frustrating. But for dealing with tough sections you also have access to bombs. Using one does nothing special, just instantly fires a charge shot, but if you hold down the button with 3 in stock, it activates a barrier that can tank up to 3 hits for a short time, similar to the way Reisen's bomb works in LoL'K. With the proper upgrades, this can also raise bullets on screen or act as a death bomb, completely nullifying damage if you use it right as you get hit. These don't protect you against hazards like spikes though, so don't think you can just run through everything. The stages look amazing too. They're a really good showcase of the sprite work, with a lot of detail put into the backgrounds on all the different elements. It's just a joy to look at. I think my favorite has to be the Animal Realm, where you can see the cityscape in the background all with this red glow, occasionally some lighting striking down, and throughout the stage you gotta break these windows to go inside the buildings. It's just really cool to see reimaginings of the often baked stages present in the Touhou games. There's also a lot of little things that I really like too. The after image Reisen has when dashing, the teleport animation when entering or exiting a stage, even the split second where you only see the silhouettes as you finish off a boss, damn! They are small details, but I think they add a lot of personality to the game. Some of the character sprites are pretty funny too, I mean, shoutouts to Doremi for striking the power pose. Doremi is just such a funny character in general, like, in any work you see her in. Something that I found a bit lacking is the enemy variety. In the opening stage you see Kedamas, fairies, rabbits, and that's most of what you're gonna see until later in the game. There are some enemies unique to certain stages and they fit in well and definitely freshen things up, but they tend to be very spread out. Even the later enemies, being the moon rabbits that show up in the last 2 stages, don't change things up that much, especially when it's almost all you see during them. Now I don't think this is something that hurts the game in any significant way, but it did get a bit distracting when I noticed it, and I just feel like there's some missing potential there. Music's pretty good though. I like that it doesn't just try to copy Megaman X's style and try to do something of its own. I mean, the influence is clearly there with all the guitar synths, which could honestly get a bit tiring occasionally, It's probably why my favorite songs are the ones that use it more sparingly, but for the most part, I really think the music manages to have its own identity and makes for a great complement to the game. Believe it or not, I hadn't actually played any of the X games prior to this. It was this Fangame that actually convinced me to try them out, which I think speaks volumes of just how good of a tribute it is to the original game. And it manages to do so while having many nuances that I think make it more like its own game. Reisen was a genius choice here. I mean, I'm a little bit biased because I like the Imperishable Nightcast, but she just works really well in this scenario and I just always enjoy seeing her in action. It's a shame that her abilities weren't really put to use here. Maybe there was a missed opportunity there. But honestly, the very solid gameplay is enough to carry the game, even if you're just a Megaman fan with little knowledge about Touhou. But anyways, that's my piece. Thank you for watching and see you next stream.